The biggest problem is that the VA has failed to modernize. But let's remember, the budget that the President put forth is a big increase and provides more resources to the VA. I am optimistic that we're beginning to finally deal with the issues that have plagued the VA system for decades.
Dr. Shulkin has done an amazing job with choice and accountability and so many other things that we are doing and in the process of doing. The Veterans Administration is a whole different place.
Well, the Veterans Administration is a different place tonight after the president's tweet. We expected this was going to come, but he fired David Shulkin today via a tweet with the official announcement. I'm pleased to announce that I intend to nominate highly respected Admiral Ronny Jackson, MD, as the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs. In the interim, the Honorary Robert Wilkie of DOD will serve as acting secretary. I'm thankful for Dr. David Shulkin's service to our country and our great veterans. You remember Admiral Jackson. He was recently at the White House for a press briefing.
I think that cognitive test, it's well respected. It's a test that's used, throughout the United States. The fact that the president got, 30 out of 30 on that exam, I think that, there's no indication whatsoever that he has any cognitive issues. People shouldn't be making those kinds of assessments about the president unless they've had the opportunity to get to know him and examine him. And, in my opinion, that's just tabloid psychiatry.
White House physician taking every question at that press briefing. Already some support for his choice. Senator Lindsey Graham tweeting out, if there ever was a home run pick, Admiral Jackson fits the bill. Combat surgeon, career military officer who loves his country and will provide the highest quality health care and services to our wonderful veterans. We start there with the panel. Let's bring them in. Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner, Molly Hemingway, senior editor at The Federalist, and Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post. Okay, Byron, late choice this afternoon, but we saw it coming.
Well, this was one of those non-surprises out of the Trump administration, but I think you have to view this in the context of the particular issue of the VA. Fixing the VA was one of the president's big campaign promises, and unlike some of the others, it had kind of a sacred obligation feel to it in the sense that these were people who had served the country and were being forced to wait for months for treatment, some of them dying before they could get treatment. This was a serious, serious thing for the president to promise to fix, which he did many times. And when Shulkin comes in, an Obama holdover, they do make some progress. They make it easier to fire some poor-performing employees. But on the other hand, he gets in trouble over this trip to Europe that taxpayer paid that involved a lot of sightseeing. Plus, there are growing conflicts between conservative Trump appointees there who disagreed with him over a number of issues of like having private care for veterans, things like that. So it simply didn't work out, and this really was one of the president's most important campaign promises.
Molly, Senator Graham is an important person to have on your side. Obviously has talked about veterans issues for a long time. With this choice, there will likely be criticism whether the Admiral has had any bureaucratic experience running something as big as the Veterans Affairs Administration.
Yeah, it's also true, though, that Dr. Jackson is someone who the Obama administration very much liked. He served as the White House physician during the previous administration to broad acclaim, so this might be less controversial. Shulkin really did just lose the confidence of the department. He'd come in with broad bipartisan appeal and support, and he lost it. And I also think what's happening is Trump is picking a cabinet that he wants. When he was elected, when he was put into office, he did his best job putting together a cabinet, but now that he's been there for a while, he wants to pick people who he really works well with, and you're seeing that with the replacement of Tillerson, with Pompeo, and with Bolton replacing McMaster, and this as well.
I mean, Chuck, if you look at the list, I think there's 30 notable firings, resignations for the Trump administration. There is a lot of change in the first 15 months.
A lot of change, a lot of turbulence, some of it not entirely voluntary. If you start with something like Michael Flynn, that was kind of forced on the administration. But I do want to go back to this question of the substance of what this might mean for veterans and the Department of Veterans Affairs. We have to be very, very realistic about the potential for anybody to make progress at that institution. It's a perennial source of problems in the federal government. And, it's a strange irony that these are the people our country owes the greatest debt of gratitude to, and yet they're the only group in our country for whom we provide medical care through a pure government-run system. it's ironic. That is an inherently problematic business model for healthcare. It's one reason there are long wait times and so forth. And so it will be very interesting to see is whether this change in personnel is going to lead to the kinds of really radical changes in policy that have often been discussed, particularly by Republicans, but never quite carried through because there's a huge, ball of lobbying interests that are very, very firmly attached to that department who are very skeptical about change.
I mean, it'd be interesting to see, to Molly's point, whether, because of the trust between Ronny Jackson and the president, whether big things can happen at the VA. Let's turn now to the OIG of the Department of Justice opening this investigation into possible FISA abuse. We've heard a lot about this from different lawmakers.
We believe the FISA warrant process was abused, and the reason we want a special counsel is I think crimes may have been committed.
Your options are DOJ investigated themselves. They can't do that because of conflict of interest. Let the Inspector General do it. Now, I'm a big fan of Mike Horowitz, but he has no jurisdiction over witnesses that have either left the department or never worked there.
We're thinking in terms of a special counsel to work with the Inspector General. We have all kinds of confidence in the Inspector General's work. We'll give him the tools to do it because they cannot be counted on to investigate themselves.
Well, today the DOJ Inspector General announced the investigation. Byron, does this preclude special counsel? What does this tell us about where this part of the investigation is going?
Well, it has never looked like a special counsel was a done deal in any way. So this was expected. And when they talk about a FISA abuse investigation, they're talking about a Trump dossier investigation. And if you look at how the Inspector General, Michael Horowitz, described what he was going to investigate, he did it very, very dryly, but it's pretty clear. He's talking about the dossier, about Christopher Steele, the former British spy who was essentially working for the Clinton campaign and coming up with the dossier, going to the FBI. The FBI decided to pay him. It didn't happen. All of this stuff, and finally the dossier being used in the Carter Page warrant process, all of this stuff is going to be under this investigation, but it's really, I think, more accurate to call it a dossier probe more than anything else.
You know, Molly, it just boggles my mind why we are just last night getting the FBI director to say, Chris Wray saying that they're going to step up and double the number of agents to respond to congressional requests for documents and the number of documents they need to find and to try to turn it around. This has been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah, I'm not sure if people really understand how bad the Department of Justice and FBI have been at complying with document requests from both the House and the Senate. And it's not just that they failed to turn over documents, it's that when they do, they redact materially relevant information, and they are slow-walking everything. It is a very serious problem, and one that Congress should actually be taking far more seriously, holding hearings to humiliate the public officials who are not complying with this constitutional oversight, maybe slashing budgets to get people's attention. This Inspector General is a good first and small step toward regaining the credibility for our federal law enforcement, but there are a couple reasons why a special counsel or special prosecutor will probably still be needed. For one thing, while the IG is better at getting testimony from people than Congress is, this problem is not just at Department of Justice, but at state and CIA and elsewhere. And there are also a lot of people who have left government that need to testify about this as well.
And Chuck, really quickly, I want to touch on one more thing, and that's the New York Times headline, Trump's lawyer raised prospect of pardons for Flynn and Manafort as special counsel closed in. Ty Cobb is referring on the record to this. Saying, I've only been asked about pardons by the press and have routinely responded on the record that no pardons are under discussion or under consideration at the White House. The article references John Dowd, no longer part of the legal team, and whether he talked about pardons at one time or not.
Yes, and I think he's denied it in a subsequent report in our paper, if I'm not wrong. Look, it is a mystery as to who exactly said what to whom, but I would just say we should all keep in mind that there are two facts about a pardon. One, it would be an absolutely terrible idea, very stupid politically, for the president to attempt. But secondly, there's nothing anyone could do about it if he really wanted to. It's the president's power to pardon people is nearly absolute. And so I think you know, what we're looking at here is a situation that obviously happened, if it happened at all, months ago, and he hasn't done it in the interim, which suggests that somebody maybe in the meantime talked sense into the president and or his legal team about the downside of doing that.
We will see. We've covered a lot in that panel.